Sir, Mr. Maltz, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
I was fortunate to be the agent in charge of DEA's Special Operations Division for almost 10 years before I retired, working with personnel from 30 agencies, law enforcement, intelligence community, Department of Defense. We had a daily battle trying to synchronize the efforts between the numerous agencies, especially as we lost capabilities to infiltrate the communications of the bad guys through encryption and advanced technology. I've always been a huge advocate of working in one unity of effort. Unfortunately, most of the time when criminal cases connect to terror investigations, we lose cooperation right here in our backyards. They don't always follow the money trail in these investigations to the terror groups because of the lack of cooperation. It's unacceptable 16 years after 9/11, with all the Inspector General reviews and the information sharing failures, that this continues. The agencies need to cooperate and share. It's nothing new. We need strong leadership here. We need, on this topic of crime and terror, we've been talking about this for too many years. We need some more action instead of beltway meetings to debate who's right, who's wrong. We all know what the answer is. Terrorists are increasingly turning to crime and criminal networks for their funding. We all know that. This has been stated numerous times. The most public example is when we speak about Project Cassandra, and we see how Hezbollah is operating like a worldwide drug cartel, moving millions of dollars and tons of cocaine all over the world. I'm thankful for Attorney General Jeff Sessions and his bold leadership in recognizing the serious gaps in our efforts here in the U.S., and he formed the Hezbollah Financing Narco-Terrorism Task Force, headed by a great prosecutor from New York, John Cronin. Forming a task force is great. We need complete sharing, though. Proactive investigations, high-level indictments, extraditions, with powerful U.S. Treasury actions is going to really do a lot to help us go after this problem. I remain optimistic because Mr. Cronin came from the Southern District of New York. It was that district in 2010 that broke down the walls of international terrorism and drug trafficking. It's the only place, I think Eastern District of Virginia wound up doing it as well. We need to learn from that successful model, break down the walls. This was bold leadership. I was recently reading testimony on international terrorism and drug trafficking from a 1985 joint Senate hearing. It wasn't very surprising, but very disappointing. That Honorable Strom Thurmond, 33 years ago, said terrorists need money to carry out their heinous activities, and there is increasing evidence that these groups are involved with the illicit drug trade. He went on to say how the terrorists are able to use the drug trade in two ways. Drugs erode our health, morals, and economy when the proceeds are used to finance the terrorist activities that are directed at this country and our citizens. That's 33 years ago. 15 years ago, after 9/11, FBI Assistant Director Stephen McCraw told the Senate Judiciary Committee how terrorism and crime are inextricably linked. Terrorism and crime have no borders, and labeled international drug trafficking and terrorism a dangerous mix. He also indicated that terrorist acts, crime, and foreign intelligence activities are no longer distinct activities, but rather profound, fluid enterprises that, through their very existence, have a reverberating impact on national security. I thank Mr. McCraw on his important words, but my question is, why are we still talking about this? Okay, this is ridiculous now. The agencies are loaded with all these dedicated, experienced people. They have tools. They have capabilities. Now we need them to come together. In response to September 11th, the DEA, along with the FBI and the Attorney General, formed a special coordination unit at the Special Operations Division right here in Chantilly. It's known as the SINTOC today. The leaders recognized the dangerous nexus between drug trafficking and terrorism, so they knew they needed a unit. However, as we approached the 5th anniversary of the Boston bombing, we realized that it failed once again because we're not cooperating. So what are we going to do? We can't investigate terrorism in a cocoon, especially going after sophisticated transnational groups like Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, and these other groups. We must shut down funding streams from a variety of crimes. It's not just drug trafficking. You guys know it's cybercrime, it's alien smuggling, it's diamond smuggling. All right, so there must be a true team effort between law enforcement and the intelligence community. Hezbollah is one of the worst terrorist organizations in the world, and Project Cassandra outlined some really disturbing trends. $200 million a month moving through a network when they're selling used cars right from our backyard in America, right in our districts, all your districts. Even though we identified this scheme, we actually seized $150 million. We forfeited $102 million, but the problem was we just touched the surface because we couldn't get all the agencies together. So we've come a long way in information sharing, but we need your help. We need the leadership's help in this country. People are not sharing. They have to be held accountable. The Special Operations Division is a good platform to get this interagency task force going. It's proven its reliability over the years. I'd highly recommend some additional resources with the right expertise. The worst thing we need in this country right now is another center. Forget it. Don't even think about it. Let's get what we have and make it work. SOD should be working closer with the FBI's JTTFs. We should provide them the resources so we can carry out President Trump's executive order to go after transnational crime and violent crime. We don't need any more centers, but we also need financial institutions to be held accountable. There has to be zero tolerance in this country for terror financing. I know I went a little bit long. I'm very passionate about this. I could talk all day, so thank you very much.
Mr. Maltz, you were head of Project Cassandra, and you described thoroughly the breakdown in cooperation between agencies. Is that what caused Cassandra to sort of fall on its face? Is the lack of cooperation, or was there more involved in that?
Sir, there was a lot more involved. I mean, certainly there was a breakdown in cooperation and coordination, but obviously there were other things that were going on at the time. There were other initiatives, other priorities for other agencies. And so I'm not privy to all of those other details, but there were things like, for an example, a terrorist like Ali Fayed, who's sitting in prison in the Czech Republic, who gets to walk out and go home to Lebanon instead of being brought back here to face justice pursuant to the rule of law. So there's things that happened during Project Cassandra, but it's a very complicated question for me to answer in this short period of time.
So you said that you need our help to cause the walls to break down. Describe a little bit more from an agent's point of view what the walls look like. In other words...
Okay, a real example would be right off the bat, since we're coming up to the 5th anniversary of the Boston bombing, when the Russians provided information to our FBI on this terrorist. Why wouldn't they tap into my center for information? What's the answer to that? Not because they didn't want to share, because the system doesn't call for that. But we have all this criminal intelligence sitting at the Special Operations Division that could have helped our JTTF investigate this guy Tamlin for his criminal activities.
But we shouldn't have to pass a law to get that. Can't the agency simply say...
Of course. Exactly. That's why when people say we need more authorities, we need more tools, a lot of this has to do with we just need some basic cooperation and start holding people accountable. And that's where we have failed.
How dependent are we upon our collaboration with foreign governments, and how capable are they? So
to answer your question, I could say that when I was at SOD for about 10 years, Colombia, as an example, was one of our greatest partners. And so with Project Cassandra, just to make it clear, when that case first started, it was because of the money launderers in the United States that were sending money back to around the world, but it was Colombia that opened up the investigation for us and identified the Middle Eastern presence. So we had all these Lebanese guys that were inside of Colombia, and they were moving millions and millions of dollars and tons of cocaine, but it was the Colombian National Police investigation that led to us identifying this global network. So we can't downplay the level of significance with the cooperation in Colombia alone. You know, as far as the extraditions out of Colombia, I mean, we know the power of extraditions. That's what we're trying to do in Mexico. You know, like if we judicialize our efforts and we collect evidence and we prosecute people and we extradite them, that's going to be a home run for the communities all over Latin America. So we use Colombia as a success model. You know, we try to actually go out and educate other countries. But they're very limited. So as one quick story, just to give you an idea, when we were doing our trade-based money laundering case, all the calls were in Arabic. The Colombians didn't even have translators to actually listen to the calls that they were intercepting. So the U.S. had to work with them and kind of help. But, so yeah, they have some limited capabilities, but they're advancing and are working very closely with us.
Especially given Hezbollah's anti-U.S. conduct, even in the Western Hemisphere. Can you describe the extent of Hezbollah's involvement with the Colombian drug trade?
Well, in that case, we saw multi-tons of cocaine leaving South America, going to Africa, drugs being distributed worldwide, money's being collected, put on Middle Eastern flights, carried into Beirut, guarded by Hezbollah. Money's coming back through the exchange houses into banks in Lebanon, back to America to buy used cars. Cars are sold, are sent on Hezbollah shipping lines back to West Africa to resell. In that case, the one thing that is still shocking to me as a taxpayer is that we collectively in the interagency identified about 300 businesses in our neighborhoods. We only attached 30 to our action because we could not get the cooperation across the government agencies. So there's hundreds of businesses still operating in our country because we were never able to shut them down. So $200 million a month going through this scheme just by one kingpin, Aman Juma, is pretty significant.
Besides Colombia, are there other Central and South American nations that you can identify that are facilitating or tolerating Hezbollah's presence in their countries?
Well, of course, all over the tri-border, but Venezuela was the command and control hub for all the multi-ton shipments. The problem was that the government was so corrupt at the highest levels of the, the government where...
Tolerating them more because of the kickbacks, the money? Or
it's all about the money.
So no ideological thing. This is all just money-driven.
In my opinion, it was about the money. General Carvajal was in charge of their security at the airport, so when multi-ton quantities of cocaine were leaving to go worldwide, it was all about the money.
What do we know about any links between Hezbollah and any of the Mexican cartels? There was reference to Los Zetas in the Politico piece.
Well, in that particular case, the Eastern District of Virginia did an indictment on Aman Juma, and they alleged in the indictment that the cocaine proceeds that were being laundered by Aman Juma were from the Los Zetas cartel. What I will tell you is a DEA undercover agent went to Guatemala and picked up $20 million in suitcases in cash from the cartel because they were sitting on $100 million and they needed money to be laundered. So real $20 million in 3 deliveries in Guatemala. So yeah, there's a lot of money involved.
Lost anything? Have we lost ground? Have we,
well,
not aggressively pursuing this at the time?
I'm going to answer this really directly. Ali Fayed wanted the head of an American back in Czech Republic, and we let him walk out and go back to Lebanon. So yeah, we've lost a lot of intelligence for our U.S. government agencies. It would have been nice to debrief Walid Makhled or General Carvajal to see what's going on in these different countries.